All right, let's talk mortgage fraud because I thought we were done with this crap and we were anything but done with mortgage fraud. And there's a new trend in mortgage fraud in the BC marketplace right now. I'm sure it's probably across all of Canada, but it's there and I'm seeing it. I'm personally, as a licensee, seeing it in the industry. So let me give you a little bit of background. There's been all this story about money laundering and mortgage fraud. And to be completely honest, through my business, somebody who doesn't participate in shady dealings, if you want to call it that, I had no idea it was happening. And now I have to admit that I saw it happen. This is the way it was working. You had some sort of mortgage broker, some sort of mortgage specialist from a bank, and they would fudge the numbers, they would fudge the documents, or maybe the buyer themselves would fudge the documents. More often than not, I don't think the buyer was fudging the documents because I don't think they needed to know what it was they were fudging. But the mortgage brokers did. And they were fudging income documents to qualify for people for more than what they actually qualified for. It was as simple as that. You had one broker, they would fudge the numbers, and all of a sudden somebody could buy more than what they could afford. That over time, if done repeatedly, drives up prices. It was a contributing factor. I'm going to admit I was completely blind to it. But that took one bad egg, maybe two. Maybe there were some other people involved. Maybe there were some documents that were forged. But it's not what I'm seeing now. And what I'm seeing now, let me give you a little bit of backstory on this. I actually saw last week a sale that made no sense. I was doing an evaluation for a client. The numbers said that their place would sell for X. And then all of a sudden in the same complex, another property sells and it has now sold for X plus $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000, whatever it is. And it makes no sense. Now, my clients are going, well, obviously I want to sell for the higher sale price. I'm not saying in this particular transaction that mortgage fraud was involved. But if it smells and quacks like a duck, so they're not going to get that high price. They're not. Because this is what's going on out there. There are mortgage brokers, and I'm assuming realtors, because realtors have to write the contract, that are trying to do some sort of cash back system. And I've seen it here in my office. When our managing broker does an office meeting, they're saying, listen, our realtors are bringing us these problems. And it goes something like this. You know, the offer will be either at the asking price with a substantial cash back, or it will be over the asking price with a substantial cash back. That is mortgage fraud. And the reason it's mortgage fraud is this. That price adjustment is likely, or very often, never given or told to the bank. Often it's done on a completely separate addendum, completely, and then held back from the bank. So the buyer actually does get cash back on closing. Now, if the bank and the financier are okay with the cash back and then the buyer qualifies correctly, there's actually not a problem necessarily with the cash back system. Why you would get $100,000 cash back, I don't know. But that's really, like, it's very common. You might see something, you know, the mortgage broker gives cash back of $1,000. Like, you'll see even the big banks do this. We'll give $1,500 back cash back when you get your mortgage with us. That can happen, but it's not what we're seeing out there. You could even get maybe an appliance allowance, or the carpets need replaced. Something gets worked into the deal, but the bank is told about it. The bank are not being told about. And it's much worse because here's what the reality of it is. Everyone in the transaction has to be complicit. Everyone. Meaning the buyer has to know what's happening because they're writing a contract where they get cash back. The mortgage broker has to know what's happening. The realtor working for the buyer has to know what's happening because he's writing the contract. The seller's agent receives the offer, so they know what's happening. And the seller is wondering why they have to give this cash back. But maybe the seller's desperate. Maybe the seller's trying to get out of their property in what is a terrible marketplace for a lot of people for people that are bleeding on certain properties. And then the worst part of it all, to get that cash back, at least the buyer's lawyer has to be complicit, because the buyer's lawyer works for the lender legally and the buyer. And if they're failing to disclose that cash back to the bank at the time of closing, it's actually the lawyers that are conducting the most amount of fraud. Now, the one person who may not be complicit in this all is the seller's lawyer, because they may not see that, but it should be on the statement of adjustments, so they would likely also be complicit. It's less of their concern, just like it's less of the seller's concern, but they would probably have to check off the boxes. I could see a way where that paperwork is done by the buyer's agent, by the buyer's lawyer, and it doesn't work out, or it doesn't get exposed to the seller or the seller's lawyer. I can see that scenario. But in reality, this is happening. And the reason I wanted to get this video out this way, and I didn't do this in a better, more edited, thought out video, and I'm just ranting here today, is because I'm not the only one that have noticed this. 10 minutes ago in my inbox, the BCFSA, the regulator for real estate here in British Columbia, has sent out a notice, and they say they know this is happening. They sent it to all of the mortgage brokers, and they sent it to the realtors. Now, you got to think, if you're the seller and you receive one of these offers and you want out and you don't want to reduce your price, this might be your saving grace. You might be tempted, but you are then complicit in mortgage fraud. And it's mortgage fraud. It's crazy. But now let's stop and think and ask why. Why is it that we are getting cash back to the buyer? There could be all sorts of things. Could there be money laundering happening? Yes. How that works, I have no idea. I'm not a money launderer. But the most realistic reason why this is happening is because the buyers themselves want to buy real estate and they do not have the required down payment. So what do? You get a cash back credit for the required amount of down payment that you then qualify for, because my estimation is the banks are now looking heavy at income, because income is what was being fudged in the previous round of mortgage fraud that we had. But this time, maybe they're not looking so heavy at those funds that are being used for the down payment. There's a very good chance that what's happening out there is somebody's giving the person the down payment. It's sitting in their bank account for 90 days. And maybe it's, we're $70,000 short. So what do? You give me the $70,000. I can then qualify for the mortgage, and we get an $80,000 cash back. I take the 70 grand, give you back the 70 grand and $80,000. The extra 10 is your payment for helping me out get in the place. So effectively, what I think is likely happening is you likely have a bunch of, say, zero down buyers, which puts us in a whole nother world of hurt. But it's happening out there. And I want to advise anyone, if you're a seller and you see that come across in an offer that somebody wants a substantial amount of cash back, and I'm not talking if there's a problem in inspection and something gets adjusted for, or there's, the roof needs a little bit of work. That's not what I'm talking about. These are blatant cash back asks from agents and the buyers and the mortgage brokers in order to facilitate these deals. And the worst part about all of this is now you're going to start to see, and we already have seen, some sales that don't make sense. Now they can slide them through, and here's why they can slide them through. Let's say, for instance, you got a townhouse on the market for $880, and at the peak of the market, that was worth $1 million. So it's not crazy to think that the auto appraisal is going to go through and you offer $950 on that. If you're the fraudulent buyer, you offer $950 on that, you're going to get $100 grand cash back. The auto appraisal will go through. And then the other one sells for $850. Now, that's crazy, because you can think that, the market came down. Maybe it did sell for that. Maybe it did sell for that. Likely not. You could also see a scenario now where people are very used to paying over the asking price in our market over the last 5 years. If that's the case, it wouldn't be crazy for a lender to see an offer that comes in 100 grand above the asking price in order to get this done. So they might look the other way. They might not ask questions. They might not get a proper appraisal. But getting back to the worst part, what is this doing? Honestly, it's keeping prices high. It's driving prices high. You got to think, if you're a buyer looking in that complex where one just sold for 950, when really they're worth 880 or 850, that now that's being used as the most recent comparable. And you may make your judgment on purchase based on fraud. You got to be careful out there. Do your comparables, rely on a realtor that knows how to do a proper comparative analysis, and make sure that you're not an unsuspecting victim of mortgage fraud, of a transaction that you're not even a part of, by overpaying for your next home.